The city skyline shimmered like a crown of light as Ethan Blackwell stepped out of his sleek black car, his reflection gliding across the tinted glass doors of the Velvet Table, the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan. The sound of classical music floated through the air as a valet took his keys, but Ethan's expression remained unreadable, polished, calm, detached. He wasn't here for pleasure, he was here out of obligation. A blind date, set up by his business partner's wife, who had insisted that someone like him shouldn't spend life alone. Ethan wasn't sure what that meant anymore. After years of burying himself in his company and raising his daughter, he had forgotten what it even felt like to want someone new. Inside, the restaurant glowed with soft amber lights, each table dressed in white linen and crystal. The air smelled faintly of roses and expensive wine. Ethan checked his watch, 8 o'clock sharp. The hostess approached with a smile, her voice practiced and elegant. "Mr. Blackwell, your guest has arrived. This way, please." He followed her through the maze of tables, his tailored suit moving perfectly with every step, his mind already counting down the minutes until he could leave. And then he saw her. Lila Hart stood to greet him, her hands nervously smoothing down the soft fabric of her pale blue dress. She wasn't the type of woman he usually met at high-end events. There were no diamonds glittering at her ears, no rehearsed poise in her smile. Her beauty was quiet, natural, warm, and utterly disarming. "Mr. Blackwell?" she asked, her tone polite but uncertain. "Ethan," he corrected smoothly, shaking her hand. "It's nice to meet you." They sat down, and the first few minutes passed like a business interview. Ethan asked the usual questions, what she did, where she lived, what her interests were, but his tone carried the cool efficiency of a man who had done this too many times. Lila, however, answered with surprising honesty. She spoke about her work as a teacher, how she loved helping children discover their confidence, how she stayed late after school to tutor the ones who struggled most. Her eyes sparkled when she talked about her students, and her laughter, light and genuine, made something stir in Ethan that he hadn't felt in years. Still, he couldn't let his guard down. Relationships, he told himself, came with distractions, and distractions were dangerous. His life had order, routine. He didn't need feelings complicating it. But just as the waiter arrived with dessert, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Sophie, his 6-year-old daughter. She was supposed to be spending the night at her aunt's, but something inside him always responded instantly when she called. "Excuse me," he said, rising from his chair. "It's my daughter. I should take this." Lila nodded, smiling softly. "Of course. Family first." Ethan hesitated for only a moment before leaving. He didn't even notice the faint disappointment flicker across Lila's face as she watched him go, the untouched dessert melting between them. Outside, the cold night wind brushed against his face, and as he stepped into his car, a strange feeling tugged at him, one he hadn't expected. For the first time in a long while, he regretted walking away. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan's penthouse, glinting off polished marble and sleek furniture that felt more like a showroom than a home. But amid the luxury, a soft giggle broke the silence. Sophie, his 6-year-old daughter, sat at the kitchen counter, legs swinging as she spooned cereal into her mouth. Her golden curls framed a face so bright it could melt the hardest of hearts. Ethan, dressed in a crisp white shirt, stood by the coffee maker, scanning his phone while half listening to the cartoon playing on the tablet beside her. "Daddy," Sophie said between spoonfuls, "did you have fun last night?" Ethan looked up, startled by the question. "Last night?" "Your date," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Aunt Mia told me you were going to meet someone special." Ethan smiled faintly, shaking his head. "It was just dinner, sweetheart. Nothing special." Sophie frowned, tilting her head in the way she always did when she didn't quite believe him. Was she mean? "No," he replied, chuckling softly. "She wasn't mean. Just, not the right person." Sophie studied him for a long moment before saying quietly, maybe you didn't give her a chance. Maybe she was nervous. Her innocent words hit deeper than he expected. Ethan had faced boardrooms full of investors, billion-dollar negotiations, and the constant scrutiny of the media, but nothing disarmed him like his daughter's simple truth. He wanted to argue, to explain that adults had reasons for things, but looking into her eyes, he realized she might be right. He hadn't given Lila a chance. Later that morning, as his driver took him to Blackwell Enterprises, Ethan found himself distracted. He couldn't shake the memory of Lila's soft laughter, the way she talked about her students with such heart. There had been no pretense with her, no calculated charm. Just honesty. And he'd walked away from it. By afternoon, the unease lingered. In the middle of a meeting about quarterly reports, his assistant's voice broke through his thoughts. "Mr. Blackwell, the school called to confirm your attendance at the reading fair this Friday." Ethan frowned. "Reading fair?" "Yes, sir. Your daughter's school. You're scheduled to read to the students." He sighed, rubbing his temples. He had completely forgotten. "Right. Confirm it." Friday came faster than expected. Ethan arrived at the elementary school, feeling strangely out of place among the colorful walls and cheerful posters. He followed the sound of laughter down the hall, and froze. Standing at the front of the classroom, surrounded by children, was Lila Hart. She was laughing with Sophie, who was proudly showing her a drawing. "That's my daddy," Sophie announced as Ethan stepped into the doorway. Lila turned, surprise flickering across her face before softening into a smile. "Mr. Blackwell," she said warmly. "Or should I say, Sophie's dad." Sophie beamed. "Miss Hart helps me with reading." "She's nice, Daddy." Ethan stood there, caught between disbelief and realization. The woman he had walked away from wasn't just another date, she was already part of his daughter's world. And somehow, fate had brought her back. In the days that followed the unexpected reunion, Lila Hart became an unintentional yet welcome part of Ethan and Sophie's daily life. What began as short chats at school turned into longer conversations during after-class reading sessions. Ethan would often arrive early to pick Sophie up, finding her sitting cross-legged on the classroom floor, completely absorbed in a story Lila was reading aloud. The sight stirred something deep within him, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just admiration, it was a quiet longing for the kind of peace that seemed to surround Lila wherever she went. One evening, Sophie had begged her teacher to come over and help with a reading project, and though Ethan had hesitated, Lila agreed. That night, their apartment, usually filled with the hum of silence and sophistication, was alive with laughter. Lila sat beside Sophie on the living room rug, guiding her through the words of a fairy tale while Ethan watched from the couch, pretending to read emails but finding himself too distracted by the sound of their voices. There was something disarming about how effortlessly she fit in, how natural it felt to have her there. When Sophie went to bed, Lila stood by the window, gazing out at the city lights. "You've built an incredible life for her," she said softly. "Most children would dream of this view." Ethan joined her, hands in his pockets. "A view doesn't make up for what she lost," he said, his voice low. "Her mother passed when she was 3. Since then, it's been just us. I promised myself she'd never feel the emptiness I did." Lila turned to him, her eyes gentle. "You've kept that promise. But you can't protect her from everything, Ethan. Sometimes, what a child needs most is to see their parent happy too." Her words hit harder than he expected. He looked at her then, really looked, the way the lamplight softened her features, the kindness etched into her every expression. For a long moment, silence filled the room, heavy with something unspoken. He wanted to thank her, to tell her that her presence had already made his world a little brighter, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he cleared his voice and said, "Would you like some tea before you go?" She smiled faintly. "Only if you promise not to drink that bitter black coffee while I do." He laughed, an unfamiliar, genuine laugh that surprised even him. They talked for another hour about everything and nothing, her students, his childhood, and Sophie's stubborn love for pancakes at midnight. It felt easy, real. When Lila finally stood to leave, she hesitated at the door, her eyes meeting his. "Good night, Ethan," she whispered, her voice carrying more meaning than the simple words could hold. As the door closed behind her, Ethan lingered in the quiet apartment, feeling the echo of her laughter in the air. For the first time in years, he realized the walls he had built around his heart were beginning to crack, and he wasn't sure he wanted to rebuild them. The following month brought a gentle shift that even Ethan couldn't ignore. His mornings, once cold and rushed, now began with Sophie's chatter about Miss Hart stories, and his evenings often ended with a text from Lila, a funny classroom anecdote or a reminder about the next school event. It was unspoken but clear, she had become a constant presence in their lives. So when Sophie's school hosted its annual charity reading fair, Lila invited Ethan to volunteer, and to his own surprise, he said yes. The day of the fair dawned warm and bright, the schoolyard buzzing with energy. Booths lined the field, decorated with colorful banners and balloons. Parents mingled while children darted between games and book stalls. Ethan arrived in his usual crisp shirt and blazer, feeling a little out of place among the chaos of paint, laughter, and spilled lemonade. But when he spotted Lila, everything else faded. She was helping a group of kids stack boxes of donated books, her hair pulled into a loose ponytail, strands escaping to frame her smiling face. She looked radiant, effortlessly beautiful. "Mr. Blackwell," she greeted teasingly when she noticed him. "Didn't think I'd actually get you to volunteer." He smirked. "Well, Sophie insisted I couldn't say no to her favorite teacher." "Ah," Lila laughed, eyes twinkling. "So it was Sophie's doing, not mine." As the day went on, Ethan found himself laughing more than he had in years. Together, he and Lila ran a small book booth, helping kids pick out stories. He admired her patience, her warmth, the way every child left her table smiling. When a storm unexpectedly rolled in, chaos erupted, wind whipping through the field, rain drenching everything in seconds. Parents scrambled for cover, but Lila was already helping children gather boxes to keep them dry. Without thinking, Ethan ran to her side, holding an umbrella over her head. "You always jump into the storm, don't you?" he said, water dripping from his hair. She looked up at him through the rain, her eyes bright. "Someone has to make sure no one gets left behind." Their laughter mingled with the sound of the downpour, and for a fleeting moment, the world felt still. Then Ethan leaned closer, his hand brushing a wet curl from her cheek. Their eyes met, and before either could overthink it, he kissed her, softly, like a whisper between heartbeats. It wasn't planned or perfect, but it felt right. A delighted giggle broke through the rain. "Daddy!" "Miss Hart!" Sophie called from under a tent, clapping her hands. "You look funny." Ethan and Lila pulled apart, laughing through their embarrassment, cheeks flushed. He knelt beside his daughter, grinning. "Sweetheart, what do you think about Miss Hart joining us for dinner tonight?" Sophie's face lit up. "Yes. Because I told you, Daddy, she's nice." As the rain faded into a golden sunset, Ethan looked at Lila, realizing that love had quietly found its way back into his life, not with grand gestures or perfect plans, but through the laughter of a child who saw what he had been too afraid to see, a new beginning waiting right in front of him.